Allison Clarkson, Woodstock. We dealt with the housing issue this morning with our post-Irene property task force. We're going to be putting together an emergency housing database, we hope, and one of the things in that would be dealing with specific populations, seniors being one of them. We have found in the Woodstock area, I represent Woodstock and Reading in the legislature, and we have found that seasonal residents have been amazing partners with us on housing, on emergency housing. They've not only given incredibly generously, we have raised close to $400,000 in our Woodstock Area Flood Relief Fund, but they have also opened their homes for up to 6 months for many of our flooded victims. The second thing is Woodstock has established a new moral standard. It's higher than the 1% 100-year flood standard, and it was put into practice with our mobile home park, where we went not just for people who wanted to go back. We had 10 totaled homes. 3 people want to go back and rebuild and put homes back where they are. They have to be raised to the 2 feet. You know, this hit us 2 feet higher than the 100-year flood mark. So the new moral standard for Woodstock is 2 feet higher than the 100-year flood mark. And that, my guess is, what works in the mobile home park is going to work elsewhere.
Thank you, Allison. Yeah.
Hi, thank you. My name is Robert Franks. I live on the mountain between Rochester and Bethel. And last August, I was setting out to kind of do a private investigatory search on the education fund that's funded by the Vermont Lottery. And unfortunately and sadly, but ironically, Irene changed my course in that rather than trying to find who allocates the money, where the money goes, what schools it goes to, what computers are purchased, etc., I decided to start promoting a specific lottery ticket for those people that lost their homes, their land, farmers that lost their topsoil, and either present 3 tickets, one for the residents, one for the business, one for the farmers, or have one combined ticket, and then your team and your group and foundation would be entrusted to then move that money accordingly and responsibly. Last week, here's an example of my confusions with the education fund. The town of Rochester last week had a fundraiser to raise money for new auditorium seats in their school auditorium. My question is, why wouldn't the education fund be contacted and asked, we need 200 seats replaced in our auditorium, and we kind of need them now. But Rochester, surviving as they are on their own trying to raise the money for the children. So what I'm presenting today is not, is really an idea. I came over today just to present this. I thought it would be a good, respectful forum for everyone to just consider that. Personally, I'm not a lottery ticket buyer. I'm not necessarily for the lottery, but in this case, I think that we need to bring it forward to the legislative branch by January, and in the interim, we need to gather signatures, I suppose, and build a referendum to present to the House and say, okay, we're going to break the lottery up and start moving it to where money is responsibly used and dedicated.
And you would buy lottery tickets if we did this, right?
And I would definitely buy it. My first one would be just thinking of my friends in Rochester who've lost their homes, my friends who've lost their farms, and I'd be thankful. I'd actually be excited standing in the line at the convenience store, holding everybody up, buying tickets. So thank you for taking time.
Thank you. Anybody want to comment on this?
It's an interesting idea, and it's something we can explore. I was on a radio show, someone suggested a box on the tax return, like the checkoff box, to check off and add some money there, which I thought was another good idea. So put in the hopper, and certainly there's a lot of demand on those funds, but if we could generate more interest, let's look at it.
Andrew?
Another idea we've been batting around was Vermont Irene bonds. I know so many people that would be so interested in investing back in their communities just to get their investment back, a very modest return. So, you know, people have been so generous. I think that's an idea worth exploring.
We're going to do a little 50-50 raffle right now. Done.
My name is Duncan McDougall, and I'm one of the volunteers with Rebuild Waterbury. It's one of the long-term recovery organizations. And I just had two thoughts I wanted to share. One was something I think you're already starting to do, and that is to capture the learnings that each of the towns and organizations have had and share them as quickly as possible, because almost all of us are going through this for the first time. One of the reasons why Waterbury has been fairly successful in moving forward is we benefited from someone who came up from Nashville, Tennessee, and shared his experiences in Nashville's floods that happened last May. So we learned a lot from what they had gone through, and I'm sure each of the towns, each of the 14, 15 organizations are going to learn things. So hopefully there's a process to really share it almost on a weekly basis. What have you learned? Because we're all going through the different stages of the recovery together. I think we should share that. And the last thought is that Irene represented probably a 100-year event, maybe longer, but unfortunately with climate change, those 100-year events may turn out to be 20-year events or 30-year events. And I'm curious to hear from Neale and others what the state is doing to establish a process on the local level so that when these events do occur, alas, in the short term, we don't have to start from scratch. We've already got something in place so we can just step right into it. Thank you.
That's a good question, and certainly we talk about lessons learned, and sometimes we spend a lot of time capturing what those are, but the key thing is we have to learn from them. We can't just write them down and say, oh, there's some lessons, we have to change things. And certainly out of this, I think even in small parts and big parts, there are things we saw we could do better. We need to look at again. And with the experience, as fresh as it is, now is the time to do that. There is a planning process that goes on at the state level, but certainly in every community, as they begin a long-term community recovery process, they will work, each community will work, and the state's committed to working with them whatever way that they want. We know it's going to be local, and it should be locally directed, to understand those and build on those going forward. And sharing them between towns is a great idea and part of something that we should be doing. With the kinds of environmental issues we could be seeing and the kind of flooding we could be seeing going forward, I think we certainly see a need for building structures that are designed to handle a lot of rain. And I think one thing we did see, if you look into transportation, folks at V-Trans and local road crews have done such an incredible job rebuilding our bridges. A lot of the bridges that were hardest hit were some of the ones that were older. The channels were smaller, they weren't built with modern technologies. At least some of the bridges I saw that were built in recent times, when they built them to higher standards, using newer engineering, ideas, modern technologies. The bridge the abutments were okay, the bridge themselves were okay. It was just the water kind of went up and went around it, which is not ideal, but it was a lot of water. Making sure we have that continuing to learn from those designs is part of what V-Trans is doing, thinking about the future. It wasn't just bridges, certainly the roads that washed away. And we build a lot of roads in very tricky spots that we have. And the roads grew up next to rivers. It's difficult, sometimes there's no other place to put a road in a steep valley, unless it's alongside the river. But that said, when we were rebuilding the road, and they have done this, with using the right kind of engineering processes and the right kind of materials, you can make that road more flood resilient, resistant for the future. Same thing goes for our culverts. We don't talk a lot about them, but a lot of the roads that got washed out, it was a result of failed culverts that were too small, culverts that were plugged, culverts that were failing before, and nobody thinks of culverts because they sit under the ground and we don't really go over them, but that's a big part of this as well. We are working to put together a list of a lot of these things before the legislature returns, knowing that the legislature will come back and want to talk about it. We want to talk about it with the legislature there, trying to get as much of that from the communities as well to begin that conversation and make sure that we can take it and build into laws, build into the policies, regulations, and other things that we're doing. It's I wish we could, I do think that, I would say this last point, even some of the parts that we know with the emergency response pieces of it, this is one thought I'll leave you with. I think one thing towns learn is that in situations like this, when it is so catastrophic, there really is nobody but themselves at the town level. And the towns need to be, and I think they're going to take steps to be better prepared. From the state level, we need to help the towns be better prepared, because we can't expect to be everywhere when all hell is breaking loose around the state. That's not realistic. And the towns perform so amazingly in this. We need to give them the resources, the capacity, the training that they need to be able to respond when the state or the federal government can't step in. So I think that's one of the immediate things that we're already taking steps to do that. And so if a disaster hit tomorrow, God willing it doesn't, the towns will be better prepared. I don't think they're quite there yet, because they're still recovering, but within a year, that should be a very short time frame action item to get the towns in a better position to respond if something like this happens again.